Mac and Mac guys, here on Birds 365. Jody McDonald and John McMullen. Hour in the books. We got an hour left to play on this 410th edition.
Yeah, 410, baby. 410.
We keep adding to it. J Mac, I did something when the game was over and done with it. I know you do as well. And I probably put too much analysis and effort into it, but it's what we do. The snap count. I was very interested to see how they rotated guys in and out on that defensive line. Because with the additions during the week and how that was going to play and how they were going to be used, Linval Joseph played 40% of the snaps, which you would think of as a non-outrageous number, except for the fact that he showed up about 10 minutes before the game started, and they threw him in there for 40% of the snaps. Ndamukong Suh, 26% of the snaps, which is a little bit less. And I would have thought that Suh had a chance to play as much, if not more, than Linval Joseph. But Joseph ended up playing more. Is that purely positional? The fact that Joseph is a quote-unquote nose tackle and Suh is less?
Yeah, in fact, Linval, as I mentioned after the game, said flat out, if we're expecting run, I'm going to be on the field. If we're not, I'm not going to be on the field. So that's going to vary from game to game. Suh's more of a pass rushing defensive tackle, for lack of a better term. So he's going to play more free technique, 4-eye, 5 technique, and Linval's going to be 0 or 1 over the center. So yeah, they're playing different positions, and again, we talked about this little stretch of the schedule with Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley coming up, and even Green Bay. I mean, Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, Derrick Henry, obviously. Linval's going to be important for those games, especially Tennessee and the Giants, because they're so run dependent. Tennessee, it's interesting. Some of these teams are rounding. I talked about, Minnesota got waxed. The Giants did not look well against Detroit. And all of a sudden, here comes the Cowboys and here comes the 49ers, who were really impressive in Mexico. Tennessee as well on the AFC side, bad start, and all of a sudden Ryan Tannehill's back. And, Ryan Tannehill's not great, but he offers that competency at the quarterback position where when Henry can get rolling, it can make it really difficult for you. The old guard is starting to show up when, football matters, Thanksgiving time.
Ryan Tannehill reminds me a little bit of Kirk Cousins. He might not be able to take you all the way to the promised land, but on a week-in, week-out basis, he finds ways to win games for Tennessee, and you got to give him that much props. One other defensive line question for you Eagles, then let's talk a little bit about the Giants faltering and the Cowboys looking as impressive as they did in the NFC East. Robert Quinn, about 10% of the snaps. I get it. That's what his role is supposed to be. He wasn't brought in here to become a mainstay on the defensive end. He surely hasn't made a big play yet since he's been acquired. The way the Eagles are using him, what they think they can get out of him between now and the end of the year. What do you make of Quinn's usage with the Eagles so
far? Hasn't played well. So I think it would be more if he played a little bit better, to be honest. It's early, and we talked about this, and Robert Quinn's part of it as well, even though he was acquired via the trade market. And, actually, he's the cheapest of the bunch because Chicago pretty much is paying for him to play for the Eagles. So from a salary cap standpoint, it doesn't hurt at all, but he has not played well. He didn't play well in Chicago. And it's kind of weird because he's coming off a season where he had 18 and a half sacks. So to fall off that clip, but we talked about that when they made the deal, Jody. I don't know how much is left there. Great guy, but I don't know how much is left. I haven't seen much from Robert Quinn.
And I haven't seen him, and I'm not watching coaches tape the way the Eagles are, just off the regular TV screen. Doesn't look like he's drawing double teams. That was our explanation.
No, yeah.
Doubled on every single play. How can you expect anybody to get to
Well, that was the whole thing when they acquired him.
right?
They knew he wouldn't see double teams here. He was seeing double teams in Chicago because they had nobody else. They have a really bad defensive line. But the Eagles knew that was kind of their thought process. The Eagles knew, well, he's not going to see double teams here, and he hasn't, but he hasn't produced. So
No,
that's a concern.
he's still yet to break into the scoring column, so to speak. All right, yeah, the rest of the NFC East. Two good performances by Eagles opponents within division, and one egg laid by the New York Giants. Giants first. We've seen a lot of Detroit this year because it started way back in August with Hard Knocks and getting to go behind the curtain and see the Lions and their coaching staff and everything else. And then, sure enough, they open up the season against the Eagles in Detroit. As per Johnny Mack, the stadium was packed. The least game with Eagles fans in the stands because the Lions fans actually bought into the hype of they could be an improved team, and they get out 1-6. All right, yeah, they hung in with the Eagles week number 1. They gave up 38 points. Bad defensive team. Sorry about that. I thought my guy Aaron Glenn, ex-Jet, the DC, was on a short leash and was looking to get fired. Lions rip off 3 straight wins, including just shutting down Saquon Barkley this week. Saquon had 22 yards on 15 carries. The 22 yards on 15 carries for the guy who prior to the start of the week was leading the NFL in rushing. Giants that bad. The Detroit Lions defense all of a sudden that good. That was one of those games, and you couldn't watch it because the Eagles were playing at the same time, and it was on, so I flipped over only during the commercial. And the Giants offense did nothing. They got Daniel Jones throwing it 44 times. You never want Danny Dimes dropping 44 times. That's a recipe for disaster, and he threw 2 picks. Did it finally come back to roost that the Giants, we know we're winning games, but not wowing anybody? Are they that much lesser a team that they get run out in their own house by the Lions?
I mean, and the same thing holds true for Minnesota as well. I mean, sometimes you just have a bad game, so I think it couples with, I don't think they're as bad. The Giants are as bad as they looked. You have these games, and that's what we talked about when the Eagles got off to the 8-0 start. One of these games is coming. Everybody has them. Now, the Giants and Vikings look so bad. And you mentioned Daniel Jones, and, we all kind of wondered, how are they doing it? They have no weapons. They traded Kadarius Toney. That didn't work. Kenny Golladay has been a disaster. That didn't work. Wan'Dale Robinson's hurt now. Daniel Jones isn't good, and he's got nobody to throw the football to. So, when the Eagles were having the problems stopping the run, I was talking to a personnel guy who used to work for the team, and he said, anybody can stop the run. You can stop anybody if you want to. Let's put 9 men in the box. You can stop anybody. But if you do that, you leave yourself susceptible to the passing game. And when you have guys who can throw the football and guys who can catch the football, well, the Giants don't. So, if other teams start to pick up on this and they're going to load the box to stop Saquon Barkley, there are other teams, though, like the Eagles aren't going to do that. One of the things I said last week on the show about Minnesota when I was saying I don't believe in them is because they play the same defensive philosophy and they don't have the players the Eagles have. They don't have the players that the Eagles have. So, they get gouged and gouged and gouged and gouged defensively, and somebody was going to figure it out, and the Cowboys figured it out. With the Giants, Saquon Barkley, and that's it. And somebody's going to figure it out. And it's surprising that the Lions, But the Lions have more talent. I've said that from day one than people realize. And all of a sudden, did you see whose practice window was open, by the way, Jody?
Jameson Williams.
Jameson Williams.
Yeah.
Jameson Williams. I don't know. Look, I'm not a big Jared Goff fan, but I don't think he's as bad as some people do. But I'm going to say this next year already. Lions are going to be an issue next year in the NFC North because the Packers are declining.
I'll add to it. The Bears are going to be an issue in that division too. Because they got all off season to add a couple of defensive pieces. All they've done is subtract for the last 2 years. Mac and then Quinn. I know Quinn wasn't playing real well, but you give him away for absolutely nothing. Then they trade Roquan Smith. Here, take our 4 biggest names on defense, and we'll try and continue to win games. Justin Fields is trying, but he can't because their defense is so brutal.
Yeah. And, yeah, that could be a division that totally turns on its head next year with the bad teams being the good teams and vice versa. But, yeah, that's what's most impressive about the Eagles. When the Eagles have bad games or less than stellar games, they would find ways to win. These other teams have these games where they just look awful. And the Eagles, they haven't done that. Even the Washington game, even the game they lost, if they eliminated some of their own mistakes as poorly as they played, they could win that game. They really haven't had that one outlier game where they've looked like complete garbage. And I don't know if there's another team in the NFL. In fact, I know there's not another team in the NFL that hasn't had that week, even Kansas City, even Buffalo.
I'll give you a guy who also looked pretty good this past weekend. And I know that he's never going to jump out statistical wise, but the guy's got command of the football team. That's Taylor Heineke, who beat the Eagles last week and played well against the Texans, well enough against the Texans again this week. All of a sudden, the Commanders are above 500. This was a team that the Eagles thought they left dead and buried when they sacked Carson Wentz 8 times back in week number 3. They're back from the dead and over 500 with a win over the Eagles in their back pocket. Can the Taylor Heineke-led Commanders make the playoffs this year?
Yeah, why not? Why not? I mean, all of a sudden, Chase Young is back. We talked about it took a while, but now they're finally going to activate him. We've talked about their defensive front since that first game because Nick Sirianni wouldn't stop talking about it. I mean, right now, I would rather play the Giants than Washington. I mean, I think Dallas is good. I think Dallas and Eagles fans hate this. I think they are legitimately good. And I think they, right now, you know how I feel about San Francisco, but right now, I would say Dallas is the second best team in the NFC. I think San Francisco will get there, and I think they're getting there, but they always have the issue with the quarterback. So they're kind of hamstringed from that perspective. Yeah, I would rather play the Giants than Washington, if you ask me. If I were just a average
Eagles are
team
going to get a
street.
chance to play the Giants twice more before the season. We're down to only 7 games left, and 2 of them come against the New York Giants. So we'll certainly get our chance and our fill of the New York Giants over the last 2 months of the season. Here's my question about Dallas, and I know they put up 40 points. This is going to sound stupid asking this question or making this point on a week where they got a 40 spot. Who's their number 2 wide? Who's their number 2 receiver? Period. Behind CD Lamb. Does Gallup scare you?
Well, he's playing better. He's getting healthier. I don't think he's a bad player by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think he was what he was previously when he tore the ACL. I think Noah Brown is competent. But, yeah, it's not like it was when Amari Cooper was there. So they go about it a different way. You know, you saw what they did with Tony Pollard in the passing game. We talked about getting the football to the running backs. They do it a different way. They're not as explosive as they were when Amari Cooper was there. but they're good. And it's really the defense. I mean, the defense, they have the best pass rush in football, in case anyone didn't realize that. And they didn't let Kirk Cousins breathe. And we knew everybody knows about Micah Parsons, but everybody else, and a lot of it has to do with Micah Parsons because Dan Quinn has done a tremendous job. Like they move him all over. And it seems like common sense, but not a lot of teams do that. So, they'll figure out who the weakness is on the opposition offensive line. And they tell Micah Parsons, go there, go rush there. And people can't block that kid, man. He is unbelievable.
I told you this, about 6 or 7 weeks ago, somewhere thereabouts, and you said, I'll take my $5 and go to Dunkin' Donuts and get a coffee and a cruller or whatever. I threw $5 on Michael Parsons to win the MVP, knowing full well that defensive players don't win the MVP period. It's a quarterback league, blah, blah, blah. He was 500 to 1 to win the MVP, 500 to 1. And oh, by the way, he's going to finish in the top 10 in voting. Mark this down right now. He's not going to win, so I'm going to lose the $5. And you're right. You're going to get more use out of your $5 in Dunkin' Donuts than I am going to on my Bet Parks account for having bet him to win the MVP. He was 500 to 1 to win the MVP. It was just too big a value for me to pass up on. He's that good. There aren't too many defensive guys who move the needle the way that he does, and he's doing so right now. And yeah, the Cowboys look like a team that are going to grab a lot of attention here in the last 7 weeks of the season.
That I think the Eagles have. I think the Eagles are a better team. I think especially if the Eagles get healthy, and as I mentioned, and Dallas is back, and Devonta's back, and Jordan Davis is back. I think the Eagles, if that comes to fruition, and they don't suffer any more injuries, obviously, the Eagles are the best team. They're the best team. But in the NFC, I would put Dallas number 2. And I think right now, the biggest concerns for the Eagles in the NFC should be the Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, the 49ers looked good last night. I watched some of that Thursday night game.
Now, they're going to be
Arizona is a team that's coming apart at the seams. If they don't have their quarterback, they don't have much of anything. So I expected San Francisco to win handily. They just flat out blew them out, and their offense was clicking. Yeah, your guy Jimmy G was running a pretty good ship last night. All of a sudden, he's got some weapons between Kittle and Debo and Ayuk, and now add McCaffrey to that mix. He's got weapons. You're right. That San Francisco team.
And that was imagine if they had a quarterback that could take advantage of those weapons consistently, how good that team would be with Debo Samuel back and healthy. He had the big run for the touchdown. Christian McCaffrey. I mean, George Kittle had a big touchdown. They're unbelievable from a talent perspective. Trent Williams is healthy again and killing people. Their defense is good. That San Francisco team, I don't care who you put, the Minnesotas, the Giants, all those other pretend contenders, whoever gets that matchup, they're going to get waxed in the playoffs. They're going to get waxed by the San Francisco 49ers.
And since they're a divisional team, they got a chance to be a host in that first game. They got to go to Minnesota. Depends on Minnesota looked terrible this week, but a road game could be tricky. But San Francisco looked awfully impressive last night. All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald, Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. Chris Franklin from NJ.com going to jump on in. We'll certainly do Birds both looking back at the game from this past weekend and start to look ahead because of a short week. Thanksgiving week here on Birds 365. We're only going to be on tomorrow. So we'll do the combo interview with Chris Franklin, looking back, looking ahead here on Birds 365.